I'm sure most of our listeners and viewers will be aware that Sulley Muntari was the victim of some racist abuse this weekend against Cagliari for Pescara. Basically, a couple of fans were abusing him throughout the game. He noticed that one of these was a little kid. He went over to the kid who was sitting with his parents, gave the kid his shirt, he said, to act as an example for the kid because his parents weren't doing it. And then went back to the referee, reported the issue. The referee didn't stop the game, didn't do anything about it. The referee, in fact, gave out to Muntari for approaching the stand and then yellow carded him for dissent, which led Muntari to walk off the pitch, and Pescara finished the game with 10 men. Luca, I'll come to you first. This is obviously something we see in Italian football far too often. What do you think needs to be done to actually put an end to it?
Yeah, obviously it is something that you do see coming up quite regularly with Spanish or Italian football as well, like quite regularly, and it's obviously unpleasant, especially when it's getting to the stage where like these players who are professionals can no longer ignore and they're reacting. It's just very hard because like obviously football isn't something that just kind of exists in its own vacuum. It's not something that's just linked to football. Obviously it comes from somewhere else. Like if it's a kid with his parents, like obviously that's just terrible, like parenting, poor manners, like without even like going into a kind of political like tangent. It's just obviously unacceptable, but at the same time I don't really see what you can do about it. Like the football authorities will obviously like be investigating, fining, and probably, I don't know, stadium closures, you have that kind of thing. But I don't know, it seems like kind of in a way it's a battle that you can't really win. Like it just depends on society on the wider kind of basis. It's not just limited to football. Obviously football people behave differently. They'll be more kind of abusive, rude than they would in their day-to-day life. I suppose like you get people being racist at football matches who aren't necessarily racist, but it's just I don't know, it's like obviously you have to punish it whenever it occurs, but I don't think there's any kind of golden solution. Obviously FIFA got rid of its anti-racism task force, was probably a mistake, saying that their mission had been won, but obviously you kind of need these bodies, but no matter what they do, there's no obvious solution. It's kind of always going to unfortunately happen, and there's always going to be these kind of incidents. You can just sort of punish them and try and get rid of people who are found guilty of them, but other than that I don't really see a way to stop it permanently.
Yeah, Nick, Luca's probably right that it is a more societal issue, but in terms of football, do the FIGC just need to start handing out stadium bans? I know for repeated offences, even because Cagliari, it's a few years ago now, but their supporters have previous for abusing, I think it was Samuel Eto'o against Inter. You might be more familiar with that. But like in football terms, what do you think people need to do to try and eliminate this if possible?
Yeah, there's no doubting it's a very difficult issue to take on. And it is very much a greater societal issue, you might argue, particularly in countries like Italy. But I know this kind of thing just seems to keep cropping up every season, and Serie A makes the news for all the wrong reasons once again. And yes, it is difficult, but I mean, you can't just keep going on like this. Like this, it's not acceptable in football, let alone in any kind of life. I don't understand how every level of management just continues to go through this charade without really trying to deal with it. You know, I understand it's very difficult, and as Luca said, there is no golden solution, but something needs to be done to at least try and quell it, to put some kind of strategy in place, to put some policies, some regulations, some real punishments, because this is absolutely ridiculous. What Sulley Muntari had to go through is beyond a joke, and for him to actually get a yellow card when he is going to the referee, for one, actually is a regulation that is in place in Serie A, I believe, where the referee, when he does hear of any racist chants or anything, is supposed to spot the official, and then they are supposed to make a call as to whether the game goes ahead. And it seemed like there was no kind of consultation like that in that game. So for one, the referee was completely out of line in that match. I think Sulley Muntari was completely in his rights to walk off the pitch. And unfortunately, football is in a place where these players need to take that kind of action actually be done, because it needs to start at that level for any kind of flow-on effect to take place. I mean, after the match, Pescara's coach, Zeman, actually said, while he sympathised, his exact quote is, "Muntari has abandoned the pitch because of racist chants, but we should not take justice into our own hands." If Sulley Muntari doesn't take it into his own hands, no one else is doing it for him. And that's the biggest shame of this for football, because the clubs aren't doing anything. The Lega Serie A, or the Italian Federation, isn't doing anything, and FIFA certainly isn't doing anything. So why shouldn't Muntari take that into his own hands? If actually, and this is a football thing, because FIFA can talk about that racism doesn't exist in football, but everyone knows that's a complete joke. If this is actually going to be taken seriously, it needs to happen at every level in football, starting from the players not accepting it, to the crowds, the ultras that a lot of this is taking place in. They need to take responsibility. It's bullshit for them to turn around and say, well, it's just a minority that's doing it. That's crap. How many people in that group know exactly who is doing this? Of course they know. They need to hold their own groups responsible. The club needs to hold those groups responsible. Ban them. Ban where the ultras sit. Yes, it would take so much away from the atmosphere, but a hardline approach. And then from there, it goes to the Italian Federation. They need to be imposing some kind of bans or fine. Well, no, fines do nothing. That bans or even point deductions down the line on clubs. And then it goes down to FIFA, where FIFA should be putting some kind of regulations on each of the federations for them to show that they actually got a plan in place to tackle this issue. Every step there should be a plan, and there should be someone accountable. And at this moment, that doesn't exist at all in football, and it's going to change in football until that happens. So yes, it's an incredibly difficult issue to tackle, but it's enough of just standing aside and just hoping that society will eventually change. Something needs to actually be done.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but it does seem unlikely that those in a position of authority will actually do anything about it, because was it last year or the year before, when Carlo Tavecchio, just before he was going for re-election as president, he described, I think it was black players, as monkey or banana eaters, wasn't it? Something along those lines.
It was a fictional Lazio player called Opti Popa, who was eating bananas one day in Africa and then signed up by Lazio in Serie A. That was the thing, and then he had a FIFA ban as a result of that. Yeah.
Right. Well, when you've got people like that in charge of the association, supposed to be responsible for dishing out these bans, it's a horrible situation to be in, because it's unlikely that anything is going to really happen of note.